Yeah, Mark Dodds. I'm going to have problems with light here. There's Mark Dodds, one of the pub professionals, one of the pub persuaders, one of the pub professionals, one of the people who knows what's going on. And as you can see, I'm modifying my environment. It's kind of weird, and getting used to speaking into a camera that's not in a car. That's bad enough. As you can imagine, I don't know where Mark McGowan goes when he does his own stuff, because there is background noise, isn't there? But I don't know. When I do it, people start chainsaws up and angle grinders, and buses come by. And I was doing it yesterday in a car park in the middle of outside a church, and a guy came and parked his car. Right, there's about 25 spaces in this space for parking. I'm there on my own. There's a car at the other end, probably 60, 70 meters away, and a guy comes and parks right next to the door of my car, with my window. It was really hot, and I was in the middle of one of these things, and he just started banging his car door right next door to mine. Anyway, went to pick up his kids from a cafe or something. Mark McGowan. That's what it's all about. Mark McGowan. I was on about Mark McGowan, and I keep getting taken off the point by my own, by what happens in my story along the way. And what I want to talk about Mark McGowan for is because he did an extraordinary exhibition at my pub, the Sun and Doves in Camberwell, in 2008, and the story surrounding it exemplifies the kind of problems that tied tenants have with their landlords, and I think it sort of illustrates how it's impossible to plan your business with any kind of confidence when you have an adversarial relationship going on with your freeholder. So I did say in one of the previous videos that I used to do art exhibitions at the pub. We did that from 1995 for a long time. It went very well. We'd have 10 exhibitions a year, and they were tended to be. We had private views on the first Monday of the month. We did all months of the year apart from December and August because of holiday season and so on. And we had quite a few artists in the time that we were there start their careers. People who left college and needed somewhere to exhibit. And it turns out, of course, the pub is a good place to exhibit. We made a bit of effort to actually have formal exhibitions rather than just sort of sticking the work up all over the walls. And as I said, as I've mentioned before, I've got an arts background, and I was very interested in bringing art into the pub, changing the decor as a matter of course with the exhibitions, attracting new people all the time to come and see the new work, which would introduce them to the pub, giving artists a bit of a break. I mean, it's not just charity; there are purposes, commercial purposes as well. Giving the artists a break, because I did know, because I had an arts background, that lots of people wanting to exhibit have real difficulties with exhibiting. They find it difficult to get shows in galleries where typically the gallery will say, well, if you've got a track, where have you exhibited before? Have you got an agent who sells? How much did your work sell for? Stuff like this, and they find it very difficult to get in there. And then galleries also charge a lot, often for rental of the space for the time that the exhibition is up. They charge for invigilation, and they very often charge up to 60% commission on any sales. So what I proposed to do was very straightforward. Originally we started 200 quid for a month's exhibition. I would produce an invitation card, offer a private view night. We would give canapes, and you can call them canapes even in a pub actually. Snacks, food, samples of what we do and what we did on the menu, and soft drinks for free. And we would generally do a white and a red wine, which we're introducing wines coming into the wine list the following month, and they were always really good. And we got that all supported by suppliers who got the idea of what we're doing, and so this is all going very well until my 2000 review, rent review, where just the rent review itself, the rent review process itself, is very demanding, very distracting, cost a lot of money to fight. I ended up through, there's a long story behind that anyway, but I ended up through the 2000 review owing the pub company £22,500 back rent, which I hadn't been able to put aside for. And sorry, the machine's making noises. I hadn't been able to put money aside because the business wasn't making enough profit. The £22,500 I asked for 6 months to pay. The rent review went 6 months over the due date, or was it 8 months over the due date? And it was settled at 54,000 from 32, an increase of what's that? 20? Oh, I'm a mathematician, aren't I? 32 to 50, or 22,000. I think it was a 68% increase, something like that. And that was because the threat of arbitration came up, and the surveyor I'd hired, the independent expert I'd hired on my behalf to represent me at the rent review, recommended that we didn't go to arbitration, because he said if you're having problems with stacking up the paying the back rent bill now, which was getting up to 15,000 at that point, how are you going to pay it if the arbitrator settles higher than 54,000? So I accepted it. It was lumped with this back rent bill of 22,000, which I then asked Peter, regional director, Peter Morris, his name escaped me for a moment there. I can't imagine why, because he's a bully. And Peter, if you ever get to see this video, I'd love to see you again and talk you through, see what you've got to say for yourself. You're a reprehensible person. He went off to Thwaites after that, got the job as managing director at Thwaites, I think. Moved from Scottish Newcastle to Thwaites. Took his Scottish Newcastle model up there, toxic Scottish and Newcastle pub enterprises bullying model up there. Anyway, went to Peter Morris, asked to pay the 22,000 quid over 6 months. This was about leading up to Christmas 2000. 2001 it must have been. Do you know, whatever, it doesn't matter. Called me into head office at Staines and just bawled me out, basically. Told me, he literally said, I've heard your sob story, we're not a bank. So it's not my problem, go and sort your problem out. And I want that money by I think it was the 4th of January, or else we'll be changing the locks on the 5th. So anyway, on the 4th of January I didn't have the money, and I borrowed the money. They sent bailiffs round on the 4th or the 5th of January. They didn't change the locks, but I got Steve Corbett, my mate Steve Corbett. That's when I first met him round back then, and believe it or not, a fellow publican lent me the money to pay off the amount of back rent which I didn't have, which I couldn't pay at the time, or else they would have been causing, S&M would have caused me loads of problems. And I think that was about 6,000 or 8,000 quid. I'd managed to pay the rest out of cash flow between the time the rent had been settled. We'd agreed the rent under December. Anyway, so that's the backstory to Mark McGowan turning up with the Sun and Doves. The continuing story from then was that I was doing art exhibitions at the pub throughout this period from 95 right through to 2000 and beyond, and right up to 2005. Then as the 2005 rent review was coming, a couple of years in advance of it, I was concerned about what would happen with my art exhibitions, because to plan art exhibitions well, you need a long program in advance, and we were organising them about roughly a year and a half in advance of the time that the exhibitions were on. So say in September one year you would be planning to be putting on what kind of shows you'd be putting on the March, the year after, the following September, literally a year to year and a half ahead. That time there was loads of flexibility. That way there's loads of flexibility, loads of time to plan, nothing gets stressed, it all works out well. You can put out advanced publicity for exhibitions 4 or 5 months in advance, what's coming up. You can inform all the customers who come to your private views what's going to happen with the next shows and so on and so forth. You can talk to your suppliers about who's coming in at what time, and whether there's any sort of product crossovers we can do, because if a show is going to be called Ruby, for example, you might want to get a port supplier and all that kind of stuff, and it worked really well. So coming up to 2005, I knew I was going to have a very high likelihood of a tough time at my rent review, and I started getting concerned about booking people in for shows so far in advance that, say, we'd have shows in 2006 planned, that I felt if the rent review went against me, I might not be trading there. You know, see, this is all true. You know, we were doing. It's very complicated to get it all across the whole gravity of it all without sort of throwing up more questions. But anyway, basically, we were very busy and doing pretty well, not making enough profits to be able to really invest in the business properly or plan ahead properly, or be able to be sure that I was going to be able to fight a rent review properly. And I was getting concerned about my commitment to the art exhibitions and so on. So 2007 comes along. There you are, see, all this time. The rent review came up 2005, and they wanted to increase the rent from 54 to 82,500. Loads of stuff around that. I'd prepared very well for it. I had loads of good arguments as to why the rent shouldn't go up, why the rent should stay the same, that we'd been over rented since 2000 and so on and so forth. I do say that very often. And the long and the short of it is, it went into a kind of stalemate, and then Scottish Newcastle threatened arbitration, which this time I accepted. And when it went into arbitration, everything just ground to a halt. There was a flurry of activity at the beginning, which was a exchange of notes of understanding how the arbitration would be conducted and so on, all kinds of timetables and what fee limits and all sorts of stuff, which all take time in themselves, and it all costs a lot of money because everybody's being paid 300 quid an hour, you know, on these kind of things, all these experts. So the art exhibitions by this time were not being planned 18 months in advance, and I decided, in retrospect, I was foolish because I should have just carried on regardless and just done all of the planning as if nothing had happened. Shouldn't have been honest to anybody, should have just booked in art exhibitions willy-nilly or well in advance, as if we were going to be trading and there would be no possible interference. So, but anyway, I didn't do that. I told people I'm not sure I can guarantee that there'll be an exhibition space here in 2 years' time, because I think I might be out of business by then. And they'd be like, oh, why? Yeah, really busy, really successful. What a great place you've got. Tell them about the rent review process and all this kind of stuff. No one ever kind of believes you. It's bizarre. You can see people listening, they hear what you say, and actually they don't get it, because it just makes so little sense that your freeholder could actually put a viable business out of business because of a rent review. People just don't get it. So anyway, exhibitions were just happening. Instead of a long program, I ran them by more or less people coming in. We used to get loads and loads of people stacking up for exhibitions. So people came in, and if they had a good show in the offing, I would say yes, and book them in, whatever, 6 weeks, 2 months in advance, and that was about it. So Mark McGowan came to me. As I said, we used to meet in the pub quite often when he was in for a burger, and he had a proposition to do an extraordinary show called Live on Stage, and it was a proposition to do a month of live performance, lunchtime, daytime and evening, 2 performances a day for 31 days, and a whole programme of events ranging from interesting performance art to theatre to music to poetry to drawing on stage to all kinds of bizarre, almost bondage-like stuff. Some of it was very challenging, some of it involved nudity. A lot of it was a bit of a mystery. I thought it was quite an interesting proposition, so I said, yeah, we'll do that. So we sat in the garden with a guy called Guy Hilton, who has a gallery, and Mark, a couple of other people, planning what was going to happen, as I say, in 2007, for March 2008. And I went through the whole Pubco charade then, explained to them what was going on, and said, if you're prepared to take the risk of the place being closed by March 2008, that's fine, let's go ahead with it. And we did. And March 2008 came and went, and the 30 days or whatever of exhibitions happened. It was really interesting, very exciting. A whole lot of stuff went on around it. We got quite a lot of publicity. But in all that time, what had happened is that the exhibitions programme at the Sun and Doves had failed, basically because of this rent review process, which I thought would put me out of business at any given stage, at any given moment, from September 2005 right through to September 2011. I knew there was a very good chance that I would be faced with an increase in rent and a back rent bill that I wouldn't be able to pay, which would mean to the business's failure, which would subsequently lead to my being evicted and the business closing down. And that went on for 6 years. It was hell, torture, really. And I got an extreme version of what most licensees get every time they have a rent review. It's madness. And it is the Great British Pub Coast Scam. That's probably too long. I'll probably have to redo it again. Cheers.